Sundapura and San Miguel, or the Republic of Sundapura and San Miguel de la Sonda, two bordering countries that make up an entire island in the South Pacific Ocean. Both are about as far from the rest of the world as you can get. Both have almost nothing in common. In fact, their differences go way back before they were even established as countries. More on why that is in a bit. Since both countries have very little in common, let's flip things around by talking about their similarities first. Geographically speaking, both countries are practically identical. Most of the entire island is made up of rainforests, jagged hills, and even mountains. Both countries share the same climates, mostly a tropical climate in the forested lowlands, humid subtropical climate in the hills, and even humid continental climate in the mountains. Both get lots of precipitation compared to most of the rest of the world, although San Miguel gets quite a bit more. In fact, there's an island in the southeast part of San Miguel that translates to Rain of God. It gets more than 318 inches of rain each year. Whoa-ness! This one's an unfortunate fact, but both countries are home to hundreds, if not thousands, of parasites in their rainforests, many of which are very deadly. In fact, the Great Famine of 1914, which occurred mostly in Sundapura, was caused by a combination of parasites that infected many crops. Nearly a third of the country's entire population was wiped out by this famine, which also resulted in extreme poverty, although that did not last long. On the upside, both countries are known for their rich culture. Most of Sundapura's population are Indonesians, Filipinos, Taiwanese, and even Kiwis from New Zealand. San Miguel's population is mostly South Americans that mostly migrated from Chile, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. San Miguel's official language is Spanish, unsurprisingly, while Sundapura doesn't have an official language, although the two most dominant languages spoken are Indonesian and Filipino. It has been rumored over the years that the government will make Indonesian the official language, since it is technically the most spoken overall. The border that separates the two is known as the Sonda Line, named by the Spanish after they wanted separation from the Indonesians that had settled on the western half of the island. With that said, let's get into some history. Long before any sails appeared on the horizon, the island was inhabited by an indigenous population of Austronesian and Papuan descent, split into what would become the 4% indigenous minority of the modern era. Because the interior jungle was crawling with lethal venomous snakes, massive spiders, and flesh-eating parasites, these early tribes did not build massive inland empires. Instead, they adapted to the geography. Many of the western clans and tribes inhabited the flatter, slightly drier plains of the west. They mastered freshwater river fishing and developed a deep respect for the volatile volcanic peaks like Mount Jaruk. The eastern nomads, on the other hand, had settled within the jagged peninsulas of the East Azure watershed. Because the relentless Pacific jet stream battered this coast, creating steep vertical wave walls, these tribes developed highly specialized, heavy-hulled outrigger canoes. They learned to read the violent maritime weather patterns, knowing that a single miscalculation meant instant drowning. The isolation shattered in 1797 when a massive flotilla of Indonesian sailors, primarily from Java and the southern islands of the Indonesian archipelago, drifted off course during a severe storm system and sighted the western tail of the island. Recognizing the immense potential of the flat, relatively manageable rainforested western lowlands, they established the first permanent foreign settlement. The Indonesians quickly realized that while the rainfall was high, it was perfect for wet rice cultivation if managed correctly. They began the monumental task of reshaping the landscape, engineering the first stepped agricultural terraces along the foothills of the West Rainforest Highlands. Over the next 2 decades, word traveled back through seafaring trade routes. Waves of Filipino migrants and Chinese and Taiwanese merchants arrived, drawn to the growing agricultural hub. This early coalition formed the cultural bedrock of the West, blending traditional Austronesian farming techniques with East Asian mercantile grit. By 1832, the Western settlements had outgrown their loose tribal alliances. Needing a unified legal framework to regulate trade, manage the massive agricultural water channels, and defend against the island's terrifying wildlife, the elites officially declared the establishment of the Republic of Sundapura. They designed a national flag featuring the crimson hoist to honor their Indonesian batik heritage and a golden sun to celebrate the reliable weather that kept their crops alive. In the mid-1810s, a Spanish expeditionary fleet seeking to expand Spain's Pacific Empire sighted the eastern tail of the island, near Azure Crest. They attempted to establish a colonial outpost, naming the region La Sonda. However, Spain's imperial ambitions ran directly into a geographic brick wall. The Spanish chose the eastern side, which was locked under a perpetual tropical deluge, driven by the local jet stream. Their wooden fortresses rotted within months. More devastatingly, Spanish soldiers lacked immunity to the hyper-aggressive native rainforest parasites. Combined with sudden flash floods and undercurrent drownings, the Spanish colonies suffered a near 100% mortality rate. Spain officially abandoned the island, marking it on their charts as a cursed, uninhabitable green hell. In 1833, a completely different class of settlers arrived. A massive group of political dissidents, religious traditionalists, and war exiles fleeing volatility in Chile, Peru, and Colombia arrived on the abandoned eastern shores. Led by religious leaders who viewed their survival of the treacherous South Pacific currents as a literal miracle, they built a stone cathedral on the coast, founding the city of Bastion. Refusing to submit to the wealthy, established Asian-centric Republic of Sundapura on the other side of the mountains, they officially founded the República de San Miguel de la Sonda in 1839. Unlike the Sundapurans, the San Migueleños could not farm the rugged, waterlogged eastern cliffs. They were forced to become a gritty maritime society, relying on deep-sea fishing and heavy cargo trade. They adopted the archangel Michael on their flag as a symbol of eternal defiance and military protection against the hostile island. As the 19th century transitioned into the 20th, the mountain wall of the Great Central Range forced the two nations into completely opposite socio-economic trajectories. Sundapura embraced unbridled free market capitalism. The arrival of British and New Zealand Kiwi settlers in the late 1800s introduced parliamentary governance and industrial engineering. The city of Quang Chai exploded into a massive shipping and financial metropolis, fueled by Taiwanese and Chinese capital. To expand the city and build massive transit hubs, Sundapura launched an aggressive, state-sanctioned land clearing campaign. By 1920, they had successfully developed 54% of their territory. While this wiped out the threat of dangerous predators and parasites on the western side, it resulted in an ecological catastrophe. Nearly half of the island's native birds, mammals, and insects went completely extinct on the western side of the pass. Meanwhile, San Miguel remained trapped in a cycle of economic hardship. Because the heavy rainfall constantly washed out roads and ruined private infrastructure, private businesses continually failed. The population became fiercely communal, relying heavily on church charity and local solidarity. Rather than clearing the land, San Miguel's population developed a spiritual reverence for the jungle, leaving 73% of their territory completely untouched as a pristine wild sanctuary. By the mid-20th century, the left-leaning political movements in San Miguel, born from working-class solidarity among the Chilean, Peruvian, and Colombian descendants, began fighting aggressively for human rights and existential freedoms. At the time, the country was socially conservative, heavily influenced by its large Catholic demographics, and homosexual and lesbian individuals faced harsh social and legal prosecution just for existing. In 1961, after After years of underground activism and labor strikes, a progressive legislative coalition successfully passed a landmark civil rights bill. The 1961 bill officially decriminalized homosexuality, making San Miguel a global trailblazer in basic existential freedom and providing a brief historical era of profound human liberation. Across the border, Sundapura watched this progressive wave with deep suspicion. Influenced by traditionalist Indonesian, Filipino, and East Asian family structures, Sundapura's right-leaning parliament maintained a strict stance against alternative lifestyles. While the zero-tolerance public order laws in Quang Chai prevented physical violence against queer people, the state implemented a system of complete legal erasure and bureaucratic exclusion that remains unresolved to this day. As the global economy shifted, the wealth gap between the two nations widened into an unbridgeable chasm. Sundapura's GDP climbed toward a Belarus-level baseline, fueled entirely by an engineered tourism machine that brought 10 million global visitors into Quang Chai annually. San Miguel's economy, crippled by isolation and bad weather, stagnated at a Senegal-level baseline. The resulting poverty caused a radical populist political shift. A corrupt left authoritarian junta known as the Council of Four seized absolute power in Bastion. To prevent their desperate citizens from fleeing to the wealthy West and to protect their regime from capitalist contagion, the Council of Four began militarizing the already existing border. In 1985, construction finished on a massive concrete barrier slicing directly through the only flat pass on the island, the Valley of Divine. Because the valley sits in a unique meteorological rain shadow, the relatively dry, stable ground allowed for the construction of a brutal, high-visibility tactical wall lined with concrete watchtowers. Today, the island exists in a state of hyper-tense Cold War stability. Sundapura has grown into a nation of 13 million people, with 9 million packed into the hyper-modern, skyscraper-laden metropolis of Quang Chai. Their economy is completely dependent on keeping the 10 million tourists feeling safe behind high-tech shark nets and pristine resort walls. The right-leaning government aggressively suppresses any mention of modern gender ideology or social disruption to protect their fragile corporate GDP. San Miguel remains just short of 5 million people, with 2.5 million crammed into the weathered, state-provided concrete housing blocks of its capital city, and the rest scattered across other small cities, small towns, and the wild, parasite-infested jungle. The Council of Four has slowly stripped away the spirit of the 1961 bill, banning the teaching or encouragement of gender ideology under the guise of national security, making all public protests strictly illegal. Both countries have a higher cost of living than most of the rest of the world. However, taxes are a bit higher in San Miguel. San Miguel also has a much higher poverty rate. Like, much higher. We're talking 4 times as high. San Miguel also has a higher overall crime rate. Sadly, it has one of the highest crime rates in the world. The San Miguel government also has very strict laws against tourism. Much of it comes from the fear of tourists bringing in invasive species of animals and plants, as well as foreign diseases. Which is ironic because the country is home to thousands of dangerous parasites. But San Miguel isn't all bad. It is home to some of the most beautiful waterfalls, caves, and coral reefs on the planet. El Vacío, home to tons of different bat species, is one of the deepest caverns in the world. Quang Chai in Sundapura is home to some of the most amazing tourist locations in the southern hemisphere. There are tons of 5-star resort hotels along the shorelines. Many of them are not as expensive as you might think. The food scene in Quang Chai is amongst the best food in the world. That is, if you like Indonesian, Filipino, and Chinese dishes, of course. And it is home to some of the best concert venues, bars, clubs, and karaoke rooms in the world. Bastion, on the other hand, lacks in the tourism industry, although I'd argue its wine scene easily rivals that of Quang Chai. The authoritarian government of San Miguel has enforced some weird but strict laws in recent years. Every private residence and community block is legally obligated to maintain a state-certified rainwater filtration barrel on their balcony or roof. However, citizens are legally prohibited from drinking unfiltered water straight from the sky. They passed another law that every household must own a state-issued single-channel emergency crank radio. By decree, this radio must be kept audible at all times during heavy storm warnings. But there's a catch to this. The Council of Four uses these weather alerts to intersperse state propaganda, anti-capitalist speeches, and moral lectures from the conservative Catholic priesthood. Turning the volume down to 0 during a designated atmospheric emergency is viewed as an act of political subversion. Neighbors in the concrete high-rises frequently report on each other if they don't hear the drone of the state broadcast echoing through the walls. And on that note, I think it's time to end this video. It is very likely that the trend for both countries will not change in the coming years. In fact, it is rumored that San Miguel will become a totalitarian dictatorship by 2050. But we can always be hopeful that maybe San Miguel will turn things around for the better someday. Thank you so much for watching. If you're from either of these two countries, I want to hear from you. Let me know what I got right and what I got wrong. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I also want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome, and thank you for being part of the channel.